This is Steve Downs, the voice of Master Chief, Spartan 117. Welcome to Quality Time, the KO Koala Entertainment podcast. Anthony and Skylar will take it from here. Master Chief, out.
Welcome to Koalatea Time, the KO Koala Entertainment Podcast. My name is Anthony Nicolosi.
And I'm Skylar Sokol.
Today we are talking art styles suggested to us live from the Twitch chat. Today we are going to be talking about the different kinds of art styles, our opinions on them, what are the pros and cons of them. There's a ton to talk about. Also, especially because, just recently, big event, if you will, in the gaming sphere is the release of Valorant. Valorant, actually, the full game's coming out tomorrow, right?
That was correct, at 5 a.m.
Ooh,
hell yeah.
Pacific time?
I assume so, because Riot, but yes.
Anyway, Valorant's coming out tomorrow, and Valorant, one big kind of topic around it, even when we've discussed it previously, is the art style, which uses the kind of realistic art style.
Yeah.
So, how about we start there? As a recap, Valorant. Skylar's been playing some Valorant in the beta, has enjoyed it. And Skylar, what were your thoughts on the Valorant art style? Did you like it or not, etc.?
So, okay, I'm going to get a little more broad here just for the purpose of this topic. I think the Valorant art style, I would classify it as like a cartoony sort of art style, right? Not like 2D cartoon, like a 3D sort of cartoony Fortnite-esque art style, right?
Yep.
A little less cel-shaded than Fortnite, though. But regardless, so here's the deal, right? The advantages of that art style are a few things. One advantage of that art style is that it provides a lot of visual clarity. It's really easy to tell what things are because things are very clearly defined. It's not like, the real world, when you look into a forest, it's hard to see all the individual stuff just because that when things are realistic, it can be hard to pick things out. But this cartoony art style doesn't do that. It provides a lot of visual clarity, and I think for a game like Valorant, that's really valuable.
Yes.
I've been playing Warzone lately, Call of Duty Warzone, and when you go to the gulag, when you die, you do a 1v1 with people in this sort of dark room, and on one of the areas, there's lockers that are dark on the side, and I've had so many times where there's literally been a guy standing there, and the guy just kills me, and I couldn't even see him because the visual clarity was so bad. Even though that game looks amazing from a realistic graphics perspective.
Yeah, how art style can affect game design and game mechanics, game flow, gameplay is definitely a thing that I think most people often I don't know. Me growing up, my first impression when I would see an art style go one way or the other was that they were choosing an art style primarily to target a certain demographic. Like if you had a simplistic looking game, it's because it was for younger audiences, right? And if you had a more realistic game, it was somehow more aimed at a mature audience.
I like to believe it's more integrated into the design than the marketing, I would hope. At least from my perspective, right? The art style of a game really informs how the emotional impact of that game, right? The emotional impact of doing something in a really realistic game, something dying, for example, is way more intense than the emotional impact of a cartoon character exploding in a cartoony styled game.
Yeah, true. But I personally, so at the time, I think that some games do keep in mind the demographic they're targeting when they choose their art style. I think the Valorant, Overwatch is another one that has a very clear visual design. It has more of that, for lack of a better term, that Pixar style to it,
Yeah, sure. That's sort of what I'm saying when I mean cartoony.
Yeah. And it does. I agree. It goes a long way in regards to communicating gameplay elements. I think there's... I mean, I don't think you can ignore, though, that... I know this was a point of discussion in the Halo universe, when Halo 5 has a more realistic art style, but it eliminated certain things from its art style and from it kind of the the aesthetic of Halo, including like blood and some other sort of things that were intentionally to target that T rating, that not
Yeah, so
M rating.
ESRB stuff can definitely affect some graphical decisions for sure. I can believe that. But I think in general, Halo has gone for a relatively realistic art style compared to what it could be.
Yeah, I agree.
So like, what
I agree.
I'm just curious, what is your favorite kind of art style? Like, if you're looking at a game and you're going to be really excited about the graphics, is it going to be like a really hyper realistic, crazy kind of thing? Is that going to be your favorite, or is it going to be something more stylized? Like, what really appeals to you?
That's really hard. I don't think I honestly don't believe I have a preference in regards to art style. I will say that there are some that are more. I would say realistic generally is more interesting to me than cartoony, but it's more about the execution of it within the context and like the charm it brings and how it communicates. Like I love Ori. Ori is like one of the most graphically impressive games.
Ori, I would
for
say,
me.
is a relatively realistic art style too.
It's kind of interesting, right? Because it has a very realistic element to it, but it's also definitely got a not cartoony in the same way as Fortnite, but like an animated feel, to it.
Sort of. I'm not even sure I would say that though. Like, it feels very realistic to me compared to like a game like Cuphead, for example, or a game like or like Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight is a great example of a game that feels very non-realistic to me, like cartoony and stylized. Unlike Ori, I just only to say that like it seems like realistic art styles do appeal to you a lot, at least based on this conversation, or like some sort of realism where like in Ori the realism comes in the backgrounds and the drawing and that kind of stuff.
The realism in Ori definitely is more of a thing than some of those other games you mentioned. Absolutely. Like I love Minecraft. Like I love Minecraft with its graphic style. Fortnite in itself doesn't like super bother me. The thing that I think bothers me is because how prevalent and like successful that Fortnite's become. It's all over the place, and so you see it all the time. There's Overwatch. When Valorant came out, like not gonna lie, I was like, oh my gosh, like this art style again. like that was my initial read on it. It's more of like it's been overplayed recently in my head.
I mean, yeah, I think Overwatch honestly started it. I don't even know if Fortnite's to blame. Because I would say Valorant really, because Valorant looks like Overwatch to me way more than it looks like Fortnite.
I agree. So, anyway, overall for me, doesn't matter. I think there's something really cool like in the Halo universe when, especially now as the game's increasing, fidelity and graphical fidelity, like even in the E3 trailer for Halo Infinite where like the visor boots up and it's like, and all that. From an immersion perspective, that's super cool.
Yeah, so that's a big thing to talk about, right? Like immersion as it relates to graphic style. I definitely agree that I think realistic art styles really cater towards immersion. Although, like, I love games with stylized art styles, like Cuphead being a great example, but I think you feel more immersed when a game is more realistic looking, for sure.
Yeah.
And that's like what I was talking about earlier with the emotional impact of events in realistic graphic settings versus stylized graphic settings.
Yeah, I mean, and it, I'm thinking in Red Dead Redemption 2, there are some sequences where there's either cutscenes or gameplay elements where a person dies, like a person from your crew is killed or something like that, and like that's just a whole nother level of emotional impact when it's a realistic, like it looks like a person died, not a cartoon character, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I agree on that front.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I don't know if you know about the you probably do, the Call of Duty Black Ops Modern Warfare 2, whatever the mission was called. No Russian, was that what it was called? So the one where you're a terrorist killing people in an airport.
Yes.
Right? I think that No Russian. If that existed in a stylized or cartoony art style, it would not have been nearly as controversial as the fact that it was done in this realistic art style, right? Like, if you were shooting like hot dog guns at like cartoon fat people, even if all these story beats were the same, right? Like, it would not have been this controversial thing.
Yeah. No, true. I mean, one thing growing up. So Call of Duty, that's one, kind of infamous example, but Call of Duty in general, like the way you can assassinate, knife people, whatever, and games similar to it, can be very realistic. I know for a lot of parents, like when I was growing up, that was one thing that people held Halo in favor for from a parent's perspective. Like even though Halo, like you still had, you still could do like assassinations and stuff. It's not really the same as killing like a faceless, like kind of robot looking guy than like a guy who you see his face, and everything. And sometimes even the sequences like focus in on the face or whatever, you know what I mean? Like it really drives the impact more. I think it's also partly why, you have the conversations around like, do video games incite violence? Because it's so realistic. It seems like, it could lead to
someone wanting to
real
replicate that event because they're so immersed in the realism of the graphic style, basically.
Yeah.
And that's a great transition into something that was popping into my mind that I've actually been thinking about recently, which is Mortal Kombat. So Mortal Kombat is a really interesting example because originally, right, it had this very, you know the art style of like the old Mortal Kombats, right? It was like the weird mo-capped, like real people sort of art style. It wasn't like this, like the same as like Street Fighter where it was like drawn characters. It was like mo-capped real people looking things. And so they've always gone for this like weird realism violence thing. And nowadays the game, like, I don't know if you've seen the Mortal Kombat 11 stuff. Like I played a reasonable amount of it. Some of those fatalities are like absolutely disgusting. Like
Yes.
They're like mind-blowingly violent. Like so violent that YouTube's automatic gore filter that tries to filter out like real videos of people being murdered triggers on them. And so people who post like fatality videos on YouTube, if they don't want them demonetized, have to like black and white color them or do things with the coloring to stop them from being flagged by YouTube's automatic content filter.
I'm not surprised. They're extremely realistic and they are violent as fuck.
It's crazy. Yeah, and I was telling my girlfriend about it the other day because like something came on YouTube and she was like grossed out by it, and I was like, wow, like I guess I've been pretty desensitized by this, but then I like took a second to think about it. I was like, wow, this is actually like really gross. And like the fact that they spent so much time like modeling like intestines and blood and eyeballs coming out of sockets is actually crazy.
No, yeah, some of the ones where you're like pulling organs and shit out.
Right, it's crazy.
Bones. It is crazy.
That's definitely the extrapolation of like realistic art style, though, right? Like,
yeah, one game that that still maintains a realness to it in a fictional standpoint and really goes pretty ham on violence is Doom.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
The more recent Dooms, with the glory kills and everything, you rip shit apart. You pull out a horn and you shove it in an eye and stuff. But there's, like I was saying before, there's just not. It's different. It's somehow to the human brain, it's not the same thing as shoving a knife in a guy's head as shoving a horn in a demon's face. You know what I mean?
Also think the gameplay caters to it too. Like Mortal Kombat is made to feel like a realistic fighting game. Like even though there's like magic powers and shit, like the weight of the characters feels very realistic. Whereas in Doom, like it feels like you're like a superhuman basically, right? And all the enemies feel like super as well. So it feels like a bigger suspension of reality for sure, and maybe that's what pulls it out, even though the graphics are very realistic.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very interesting how different realistic graphic styles like provide different experiences.
Now, I do want to touch on the fact that I just would be lying to myself if I didn't discuss, like, I really think that when these big publishers sit down to talk about these new intellectual properties and they scope out the different games in their portfolios, which ones are going to hit what demographics, that I feel like they for sure are influencing the direction to some extent. My guess is that for these bigger studios, there's a communication back and forth, like the studios are kind of told ahead of time, we're kind of thinking of a game like this that you guys are going to make next, and there's some back and forth on exactly how that goes down. I think that's how it'd probably shake out in the real world, but that's from the the man perspective, right? This is Anthony coming at us with the AAA corporation perspective, and me coming at us with like the indie studio design first perspective, right?
where like
Yes.
the people decide what kind of game they want to make, and then they make that game, and the art style is like there because the design it caters to the design of the game, and the design is what they're selling, and the art style is just a package with that, right? Whereas like these people who are like, you know, marketing first companies, right, like these big corporations who have to make tons of money off their games, I'm sure that you're right that like the art style is another thing that goes into their like pile of algorithms that tells them how many dollars they're going to get from selling this game.
Right. If we have this art style, I can throw it down these advertising channels where we can get in front of these many eyeballs, which have this this demographic that make much money. So that's another interesting thing that you're bringing up, the indie games that we personally have experience of, is that indie games have the resource constraint too, right? Like the these different art styles take different amounts of effort to implement, etc. You're also
realistic art styles being one of the most difficult by far.
Yes, to execute. I mean, also part of the realistic art style, I would kind of include the animations involved.
Yep,
like if you
totally.
have a realistic style game, even if it looks. So this is actually something that came up in the recent Unreal Engine 5 demo. Like that lighting was awesome. They showed the new lighting. They showed you could hear the new audio engine. But if the animations weren't good, like it'd be like, well, this technically looks great and this technically sounds awesome, but like why is that guy walking like that?
No, that's
you know what I mean?
really interesting, right? And that's a weird thing about the modern day, right? That these engines do provide people with a way easier path to create these realistic art styles. It would actually probably be more difficult for us to create a game in a really stylized art style than it is in a realistic art style nowadays, because of the availability of the engine art. Whereas in the past, that was definitely not the case. The 2D stylized art styles were so much easier.
Yes. Actually, right now in Twitch live chat, we have a question in from, I believe this is Sean, asking, how long would it take your team to make a realistic art style versus pixel art? So
yes,
along
from Rollick. Yeah,
lines,
that was what inspired me to make that comment, exactly.
Yeah, like for us, pixel art is something that's going to require a significant amount of like. We would
need to hire artists to do that.
We'd have to hire artists, to make a art style. While Unreal Engine provides the framework for leveraging static meshes and content creator asset tools, so that like we can use realistic, whatever. So, in a way, like Skylar's saying, it's easier for us. Now, at the same time, the thing I want to point out, because I just recently watched a documentary on, I can't remember his name. You'll know, the creator of Super Meat Boy.
Team Meat, Edmund McMillan.
Yes. He was talking about the game before, Gursk.
Gish?
What's it called? Gish. Gursk is from the Discord.
I got you.
Gish. And he was talking about that the way he got into it was because he used to be. So this is like how indie games work, is what I want to highlight, and like the art style behind it. He used to have a job in which he basically picked up dead animals off the road, like they got hit by cars and stuff. And while he had dead time, he would draw them like in cartoon format, because he literally had nothing to do.
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
So his art style, right? Like it's also with Binding of Isaac, right?
Yeah.
He did like that too. So it's kind of got you can see he used to draw these things, and with the developer of Gish, I don't remember his name either, like the actual developer. He saw his stuff and was like, McMillan is that his last name?
Yeah.
He was saying like, I thought he wouldn't let me like keep it or whatever because it'd be so weird. So indie games in a lot of time is really just indie developers being resourceful with the content, with the skills they have. Your constraints are resources. You can't hire. I just saw this joke on Twitter about animators, but I think it applies here too for art. Like AAA studios are like, man, we should really get an animator to work on like, the wrist movement of the character.
This one, like,
and then
yeah.
Like, it'd be great to have an animator. Period.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. No, and I mean, the thing we talk about the most is, if we were considering trying to bring other people on, is always art and animation, because those are the places where like you really need a specialized skill set if you want to do something beyond the realistic art style that Unreal provides, right? And just the basic cut stuff that you buy from the asset store, which is great. And the fact that that exists is amazing. But I do think you were bringing up an interesting point earlier. You said it's like a constraint that people can't make these super realistic, really high quality things like the Unreal Engine 5 demo without really real resources, right? Like no matter how much megapixel scan textures we have, it doesn't matter. Like your guy is like a 2-frame walk cycle, right?
Yes. Yes.
And so I think the constraints are cool because they potentially force these studios into making more stylized experiences and more interesting designs, right? Like if it like Cuphead is so unique because it has that design, you know, because it has that art style. And I'm sure they went into it design first saying, I want to make a game that has this cartoon art style, right? And that was the thing that inspired that game. But like, it's crazy. And I think one really cool example of like how valuable art is and how art influences design is Sea of Thieves, because that whole game only exists because a company made an engine for rendering water really well, and Microsoft was like, let's make a game out of this, right?
Sea of Thieves is a good one to bring up because Sea of Thieves is also cartoony,
Yes.
like the characters are, but there's elements of the world that are real as fuck, like the water.
Yes.
And in that particular game for Sea of Thieves, I thought it worked great. I thought the water is such a. I think that if the water was cartoony, I don't think Sea of Thieves would be as cool as it was. Like that, like you said, that water engine, whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
like, made.
It does, because when you're sailing in the middle of the ocean, like it makes it really cool to be there and feel really unique, right? It's not just like blue flat stuff. Because yeah, it's literally the thing, as Rollick just pointed out in Twitch chat, the thing you look at the most in the entire game, right? So if the thing that is the main focus of the entire game isn't good looking, then the game isn't going to be as appealing. So that's a totally really good point.
Yeah, 100%. I'm thinking of like other games that have that element where they're generally cartoony, but then they have these really realistic elements tied into them as well. It's kind of, you know, what game that has like good graphics, but like totally holds its own, well, kind of forced to cartoony elements to it is Super Smash. Like, so Super Smash Brothers has like cool levels, like cool detailed levels sometimes in the background.
Yeah.
But it maintains like, you know, all of the, of course, like thematic styles necessary.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting game because it meshes a lot of different art styles into one game, right? Like Mr. Game & Watch's art style, but also like some of the explosions are really realistic.
Yeah.
It's got a really.
I appreciate that.
I do too. Yeah. It's like a really interesting, eclectic mesh of the of different art styles, and I think that's one of the reasons it's so appealing, and maybe why for me it's better than a lot of other Smash Bros. Like games that have come out, like Rivals of Aether, Brawlhalla. A lot of these other Smash Bros. Like games have a very homogeneous art style. They don't feel like Smash Bros. They don't feel like a mishmash, right? They feel like everything was there because it was put into this one game, and I think that makes them way less appealing.
Yeah. You know, another game that iterated in an interesting way for art style is Rocket League. So the first game, in my opinion, is more cartoony. Maybe it's because there are limitations on.
I think it just had bad graphics, honestly.
Yeah, maybe. You know, but I feel like that game could have been taken in a cartoony direction and still been executed from a game perspective just as well.
Yeah.
And they took it realistic, and I think it's sweet as fuck that they did.
I think it is stylized, though. It doesn't feel like total realistic. So, and I think the stylization helps, right? And
well, actually, there's those animated elements, right? Like you get those like kind of like Smash. You have these boosts and stuff that are
right. The
cartoony.
Decals, the toppers, like the goal explosions. There's a lot of like cartoony stylized art on top of these realistic elements.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm not. There's definitely something about games that have these realistic elements, or bridge the realistic with the cartoony that I find interesting. Like, I definitely think Sea of Thieves is more interesting from an art style perspective to me than Fortnite, and I think it's more interesting to me than Overwatch, et cetera, et cetera. So, anyway, that's my.
So this transitions into this topic that I'm really interested in talking about with art style. This one of the things that I think is the coolest a part of the art style discussion. That's game longevity, because I think that this is one of the huge advantages that stylized and cartoony art styles have over realistic art styles, is that stylized art styles like Cuphead is never going to look bad. That game is always going to look amazing. Ori, another example of a game that's going to always look amazing, right? Like even like Mario 64, which is blocky as hell, still like has this charm to it. Whereas like Call of Duty like 1 or some that's not gonna look good. Like you're gonna look at that game and be like, this looks like crap. Same with like Super Acrobatic Rocket Power Battle Cars, old Rocket League, looks like crap. Like it doesn't look cool and stylish, it just looks like crap now. And that's a huge thing with stylized art styles. They make these games able to like survive the test of time because they're unique. They're not just like, oh, this isn't as good looking as games nowadays. It's like, oh, this is unique and doesn't look like anything even nowadays.
You know, one thing I'll say though on that front, I think there are ways that realistic style games can increase the longevity of their art style, and quite frankly, I think Halo is one of the examples of it being done well, and this is why. Like,
of course, you have to say Halo did it well.
Because listen to this is why I think so. I think the sci-fi genre in particular has that as an advantage to it in the realistic space, because you have a lot of elements in the art style that are not they're not, you don't have any expectation of them. You have no foreknowledge of them. Like the Forerunner structures, you don't, that's a new thing. Like there's no such thing as a Forerunner structure in real life for you to pull a reference from. And while the polygon counts and stuff, like, you know,
yeah, like, are you really going to come here and tell me that Halo 1 still looks good? Non-remastered?
No, Halo 1 is the one that visually ages definitely the worst. I mean, that game's fucking like almost 20 years old.
Yeah, but Mario 64 is older, right? And it still like looks okay. Like it still appeals to the eye.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say like I personally find Paper Mario to like be in much better shape than
Mario 64.
I'm sorry.
But
yes.
okay, well, sure. Then let's talk about like Mario Bros. 2 or Mario Bros. 3, right? Like a pixel art style game, right?
No, it's true. I totally agree with you on that point. I think that like in the case of Sea of Thieves, for example, that was there's a whole GDC talk about the art director, I believe, speaking of when they were coming up with the art style. That was an intentional reason why they chose that kind of cartoony art style, is because they knew this was going to be a service, like this game was going to last for a while, and they wanted it to the art style not to hold it back on that front.
Yeah, no, totally.
So,
I think it is interesting though, as Rollick points out in chat, that sometimes these older graphic styles do provide more visual clarity because there's just less busying up the environment because of the limitations of the system, right?
Yep. I agree. Also, they had limitations around like even colors and stuff, right? So like the color palettes, at least in my opinion, seem way more readable.
Yeah, there's just more contrast. You mean like between the different color choices? Yeah,
and also you have to think about like they were dependent on like the display mediums of the time, like the TVs then.
The CRTs
did not have the color ranges that we have now. You know, the CRTs are also like from the graphical fidelities, and also like the platforms they were targeting, right? Like it's kind of crazy that I can still play a 20-year-old Halo game in the first place. And it's kind of expected that like the models they used that were originally intended for fucking whatever Windows 98 on their development platforms, like it's just they had different limitations, and so it's definitely interesting. It's funny. It's so much. Rollick says in chat, so much easier to see the enemies in the old graphics versus the new. Like it's kind of like your Gulag example, right?
Yeah.
Like the thing. I think that depending on what you want to do with it, like I feel like personally, I think the horror genre really benefits from the increase of fidelity.
The more realistic graphic styles really benefit because we were saying the emotional impact and the immersion is stronger in realistic games, and that's what hits the horror stuff. Like when I tried to play Silent Hill 2, that game's supposed to be super scary, but its graphics are just so poopy and flat now that it's like hard for me to care. It was hard for me to feel like any amount of horror. whereas I play like Until Dawn, which is like more realistic, and I loved that game. It's and like a lot of modern horror games are way scarier.
Yeah.
Yeah, this actually brought me to an interesting point for sure. This whole old graphics, you're able to see people better. This brings us straight to the point of, I don't know if you know this, you probably do, that in general, in competitive FPS games, pros play the games on the lowest graphics settings, almost exclusively, right? Like all BRs, Valorant, all these games, people turn everything on low because they want to be able to see the people the easiest and have the like most accurate shooting. Like in PUBG, if you used to be able to like turn off foliage and it would like remove like tons of bushes and shit. So like people who are hiding in bushes, you could just see them perfectly now.
Yeah, PUBG. Yeah, they really thought everything through really well.
But I mean, in general, this is a huge thing. Even in like the most modern games that have the most work on these graphics, right? Even in Valorant, which I think has like some of the best visual clarity, people are still turning it down to the lowest settings.
Oh yeah, I hear you. I mean, I like playing the Halo CE, like the original Halo and Halo 2 classic versions over the anniversary versions sometimes for that reason. So, especially in multiplayer. Yeah.
Why is just because you can see it better?
Well, it's not the only reason, but it's one. It's more of, it's not even necessarily that I can see it better is the only reason. It's more of that I think that it's especially evident in the anniversary versions. There's amount of stylization and stuff applied to modern day stuff that, I don't know, almost like steals some of the charm away. Like kind of in pursuit of realistic and I don't know, better, more realistic textures and blah 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 blah. I don't know. I feel a little bit of the charm of the original game was lost. How different things, but I don't. There was something about your imagination filling out some details that was just a little more interesting than maybe the anniversary editions ended up.
Sure, I got you. So Kellen Q's 123 in chat has been wanting us to talk about Battlefield's destruction mechanics, and I think this is an interesting topic in general, just destruction mechanics in games in general. One of the first games that did it was oh god, and now I'm blanking on the name, but there was this game that took place in space. It was part of a series, and it like was touted for its destruction. Red something. Rollick in the chat knows. I can't remember what it's called though. But it was on Mars, and it like you could like basically you would place charges at the bottoms of buildings, and you would be able to blow them up, and it would like knock down the buildings. And this was like over 10 years ago. So this was like before destruction mechanics really existed.
I can't remember either.
And it's really satisfying. Like having cool destruction mechanics in games is really satisfying. I think because Red Faction Guerrilla, that is correct. It is really satisfying because it's really not something you get to experience in real life. That's a really unique thing that realistic graphics can do, I think. Because they're immersive and because they can provide these more realistic experiences, you can experience something you can't experience in real life in a relatively realistic way. And this building destruction in Battlefield and Red Faction Guerrilla and all of these games is one thing that, like, who doesn't want to, like, blow up a building and see it fall over, right? Not, like, with the intention of harming anyone, but just because it's, like, a huge thing that's, like, falls over, and, like, the physics of it is just amazing how it, like, collapses on itself and everything. And to be able to see that in a game and be able to, like, use that to your advantage in a game is a really cool, like, experience.
Yeah, this is definitely something, I mean, we have, like, kind of firsthand knowledge and exposure here on doing destructible environments and stuff is something that requires significant, like, technological advancement. It's a very computationally expensive thing to do. It happening as well as it does in, like, Battlefield is really impressive because that game already has a shit ton of stuff going on.
Yeah.
So for them to do that well is tough. You see that their Unreal Engine is taking strides on that. Like, they're pushing that forward in the latest versions. It's even those dynamic destruction systems are getting pushed even further. So I think we're going to see even more of that, and I agree. It also makes the world just seem more realistic. Like, if a rocket launcher in Halo were to hit me and blow up the wall behind me, that's just way more realistic,
sick, right?
So
that's totally true. And yeah, more and more games now have more and more realistic like bullet holes that go in things or whatever. When explosion happens, stuff changes, and it really changes the game. Like it makes it feel way more immersive for sure.
As these computers, like I mean, because you have to you need to keep state data information around that persists across I don't know how long amount of time for that bullet hole, the location, and even depending on how the thing is implemented. If they really want realistic bullet holes, you might even have like different levels of detail, like textures and mesh, like for an actual bullet hole.
Yeah,
so,
it's crazy.
Anyway,
to get these like persistent small details in these games where someone may not even notice it, but they put it in anyway just because they're like passionate about the realism, or the consistency.
And I mean that's also like for sometimes people wonder it's like why don't other games do this or what blah blah blah. I mean like that's part is like do we have realistic bullet holes or do we maintain like a consistent 60 frames per second in this space?
Right, exactly. Or do we make the game 200 gigabytes like Call of Duty, or do we make the game whatever?
50 gigs of Call of Duty Modern Warfare are bullet hole assets.
Right. Yep. Exactly. All right. Well, where can people find us?
You can find us at koalaentertainment.com. There you have links to all our social media. Instagram is our main landing spot right now. Check out our YouTube. This podcast will be available. The video on demand, the VOD, the VOD will be available tomorrow, so you can watch us live. Most of all, though, join the Discord. The Discord is the place to be. It's the place where you can get your first exposure to the universe of the game that we're building. You can also hang out with the devs directly, but also, more importantly, the awesome community. It's legit.
And also Agora, the secret company involved in the universe of our upcoming game.
Yes, they're a big part.
And actually, big things coming very soon through that too. So get on there.
Rallic in Twitch chat saying you can talk to him in the Discord. It is true. You can. And Kuz, everybody.
So,
anyway.
So join the Discord. Check us out on all of the social media stuff. And thanks for listening.
Like giveaways everywhere. There's giveaways everywhere, guys.
Yeah, if you want free stuff, Anthony loves giving away his money. So go check it out.
If you want to support our studio, check out some sweet merch. The easiest way to find it is, we're actually both wearing it right now. We're both wearing some. This shirt, like, legit is comfortable.
Mine came in the mail. It's really comfortable. I wore it yesterday.
It's actually really good. We super appreciate it. Koos just got a hoodie. He just ordered a hoodie.
Hell yeah, nice.
Thanks, Koos. Thanks, guys, everyone, for your support. Until next time.
Yep. Talk to you next week.
Hasta la vista.
Let us know what you think about art styles in video games in the Discord or on any of those social media platforms.
Yeah.
Peace. All right, I stopped my... Did you stop it? I'm going to save it before it goes away. I guess you should export it the same way you did last time and send it to me, because that worked well.
Okay. Podcast 25.
What? Link 'em, Sean. We'll do a live Valorant patch notes review on the stream, and we'll get Anthony's opinions on all the things he has no idea about.
Okay.
1.0. Oh, shit. Hell yeah.
Podcast 25. What did we just talk about? Art style.
Art styles. Oh, yeah, wait. I should finish saving this. I got so hype about patch notes. Can we have an episode about how hype patch notes make me? Because it's pretty depressing.
To be fair, I was pretty hyped reading through the life of a bug in the latest Halo community update. That was a pretty good read.
What is that?
They documented the whole life.
Of a bug. I thought you meant an insect, and I was like, what the fuck?
That was good. That was a good read.
That sounds cool. Saving. All right, let's see these patch notes.
From the point where Big Boy 69420 bitches on it on Twitter, from the point we ship a fix.
Did they say that? Did they say Big Boy 69420?
No, they should have. I think we have a follower on Instagram called Big Boy 69420. I see him all the time.
That's amazing. All right, let's see what happened. Updates. Map updated. Again, this is hilarious. They're literally launching this game, and this game should be launched in like 6 months.
Oh, typical game development.
Yep, it's so dumb. Like, they're literally releasing a completely untested like map and hero into the game on launch. Like, and they're delaying ranked by 2 weeks. The game is not launching with ranked, even though it had ranked in the beta for like 2 months.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Why the fuck are they releasing it? They don't have a publisher.
Competitive mode will not be on launch. Similar to our closed beta launch, our initial focus is making sure our service is stable before activating competitive matchmaking. This is also a way to give new players the same courtesy that closed beta players had to learn the game ahead of turning on competitive. We'll also make some adjustments to competitive based on remaining closed beta player feedback. Our plan is to turn on competitive a few patches into our launch.
Nope. What the mistake?
It's bad.
Don't do that.
Oh yeah.
Don't do that.
That
is not good.
Sean, did they fix?
They were doing so good. You know, they had their you buy shit, we give you 20% back, all this stuff rolling for him. Now you have Skylar come in. You know, he gets his cosmetics, but fucking like, let's say it takes 2 weeks for.
Right, it's gonna be at least 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean. That's plenty of time for people to churn, you know? So
right. No, yeah. Like, I'm going to buy my cosmetics. I'm going to play some unranked games with Sean, and then I'm going to be like, why the fuck are we playing unranked in Valorant?
Yeah, and you're going to wait, and then maybe you'll come back. Maybe you won't.
Wait, Sean, how do you know there's a new bug?
That sucks.
Oh, they took out your brimstone. Wait, known issues? Is that you... What? Oh, okay. It's only if you have extreme packet loss.
Does Tencent have a stake in Riot or something?
Tencent owns like 70% of Riot.
Oh, really?
Don't they?
That's why
yeah.
It.
Isn't that right?
Big boy China, man.
They were majority acquired by Tencent. They're fully owned by Tencent. They're 100% owned.
Oh.
They're fully acquired in December 2015 by Tencent.
That is why they're shipping it now. Yeah. Just follow the money path, and all will make sense.
Yeah. Did you know Tencent owns 40% of Epic?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, they own 100% of Riot Games.
I hope Epic buys back their 40% stake now that they have
$400
billion.
So sick. And then they should advertise that publicly.
Oh, yeah, we bought it back. Big boy 69 420. I'm telling you, we have a.
Anything else we need to tell Anthony about these changes? Let's see. So one of the things about the game that was ridiculous was that on every map, people found like hundreds of exploitable places where you could use abilities off the map where you weren't supposed to, or like teleport off the map or shit. And things are still being found on the last day of beta. They said they expanded their system that combats map exploits, which will eradicate anyone trying to escape the play space. So we'll see how well that works. Literally, they released this system like a week before beta ended, and someone found a map escape like last day of beta. So we'll see.
I mean, like sometimes with these bugs, right? Like they ship a build, they are already pretty far into another build. They already know some issues, right, that you're about to find out. It's hard to say.
Right. Oh, wow. They changed split mid intensely, Sean. Did you see the screenshot comparison?
All right.
Anyway, all right. We can call it. I'm going to go talk to Sean about these changes.
I need to get my house ready to sell.
Hell yeah. Go do it.
This is it. Look. This is it. I'm in the basement. This is definitely the last quality time ever recorded in this basement.
We record them. That's where we record them in person too. So all the in-person ones were in there.
Yep.
We're gonna have
end of an era.
Yeah.
Time for something new.
Yes.
Bang.
Gotta take your house address off any of our company information.
Yeah.
There's a bug next to you. Yeah.
That thing is huge.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
That showed up pretty clearly. That's how I knew it was huge.
Wow. That is, and it's like one of those that like sounds like a motorcycle. It's so fucking huge. And I have headphones. Motherfucker is like, oh, okay, I'm gonna go kill a fly.
Yeah, Dara's out back on the balcony.
Oh, yesterday I sliced my shin muscle with some glass.
Show us.
Oh, fucking gross. I have a cool bandage on it.
Let's
I
see
don't
the
know
cool
if you can-
bandage.
Oh well, my cool bandage is just freaking.
Hell yeah. Oh my god. All right.
Yeah.
Let's get out of
Ooh,
here so
let's
you can
laugh.
go make a funny montage to post to Instagram.
I do. Yeah, maybe for tomorrow. See you guys. Yeah.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.